Thank you for tuning in today. We're super excited you're here as we walk into today's conversation. Our prayer is that it would inspire you on your walk with God and support you in a weekly rhythm of connecting with Him. To access our full podcast library, visit hobokengrace.com or our app.
But as we come together today is a special day for us here at Hoboken Grace because today is the day that I get to see the faces of all of you who normally sit in the back. But today you all move to the front, and so I get to actually see your faces. No, today is a special day for us because as we launch into this new conversation called Capturing Christmas, as we launch into this Christmas season, we get to start with and we get to be led into it by the little ones who are part of our family. And I love that we get to do that every year here at Hoboken Grace, and we're excited to be able to do that as we move through today. And I know right now you're thinking, why'd they even let him talk today? That's not why I'm here. Let's move on. But before we get to them, we're going to have them come up here in just a little bit. But before we do that, I just want to set the tone and kind of set the tone for where we're going with this conversation as a whole. And then also, hopefully, be able to set the tone for today. And maybe you'll be able to experience what it is that we're walking through a little bit differently and be able to experience, even as the little ones come on the stage, a little bit differently today because of something that I want to share with you before we get there. And as we move through this month, one of the things that we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at, okay, what is it? How do we experience Christmas? And what do we think about when we think of Christmas? And then what does it actually mean to capture Christmas? What was Christmas actually about? Because for a lot of us, when we think of Christmas, we think of trees and we think of joy and excitement and celebration and all of this. But the reality is that Christmas itself was really gritty. I mean, really gritty. But because of the fact that, one, we're separated from it in terms of time and culture, and then also because of the fact that most of us grew up in a city, we don't have a very good idea of what Christmas actually was, because even when you read through the story and you hear about him being laid in a manger, for many of you, the fact that you think barn and you're thinking, okay, he's born in this barn, but the reality is that it probably wasn't a barn. It was probably a cave. This was much grittier than you think. And even if you've ever been, I don't know if you've ever been in a room when someone gave birth. If you're a parent, it's a great place to be. Outside of that, it's terrifying. It is not a great place to experience. And even as a parent, it's tricky. There's blood everywhere. And now just imagine that without a doctor and a nurse to clean up the baby. I remember when my first son was born, they lifted this thing up and I was like, I don't know what that is, but we need to find the baby because that's clearly not it. And they're like, oh no, we'll clean it up. I was like, yeah, please clean it up. I don't want to touch, and just imagine that without the doctor, this is a gritty story. And it's so far from what most of us picture when we think about Christmas. But not only do we oftentimes miss what Christmas is about in terms of what's happening physically, but more importantly, I don't know that we fully understand the significance of what's happening in this moment spiritually. Because from the beginning, as God is sharing this story with us, the story that we're in the midst of, and He's sharing how He's pursuing us, one of the things that God calls us to over and over again is the reality that this is a battle. This is a battle, that there is a battle that's going on for your heart, for your soul. Ephesians says it this way. It says, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood. And this battle is not God battling against men. This isn't about battling against people. He says, no, it's against rulers, against authorities, against powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. And when you look at Christmas, from the beginning, God had promised a rescue. From the moment that we stepped out of relationship with Him, from the moment that we decided, no, we're going to go our own way, God had said, listen, I'm coming and I'm going to send someone who's going to rescue you. I promise you there's a rescue coming. Now, interestingly, a lot of time had gone by, and when you come to Christmas, even the religious leaders, many of them had given up on the idea that the rescue was actually coming. Most of them had come to the point where they said, this isn't actually going to happen, and they were trying to do their own thing because they didn't actually believe that God was going to do what He said that He was going to do. But Christmas is this moment where God says, okay, go. And if I were to capture Christmas, if I were to say, okay, what is it what's actually happening in this moment? The thing that just comes back to my mind over and over again is this idea of Christmas is really the spiritual D-Day. It's where God says, okay, no, yeah, I've been promising this rescue. I've been promising this rescue. Now is the time. Go. And it's this incredible invasion. In the midst of this battle, this incredible invasion where God says, no, I'm stepping into, and he talks about the evil of the world. I'm stepping into the brokenness. I'm stepping into the story. Go. And it's this incredible moment, this invasion where God steps in and says, I'm coming for you. But he comes in such a unique way. He comes in such a unique way. To be born as a child. And the reality is there's a lot of different reasons why that happens. But there's something that God wanted to communicate even through the way in which he was born, the way in which he entered the story. Because he doesn't invade as a conquering hero. No, he comes in differently. And as we walk into this series, I think it's important for us to understand that even the way that he enters the story is significant. There's a moment where Jesus is looking out over the city of Jerusalem, and he says something interesting about the city, and I think it helps us to understand why he came and what this was all about. I love this passage. As a matter of fact, I've studied this passage many times, but even as I was preparing for today, this passage took on a whole different meaning for me, a more substantial meaning for me. Jesus is looking out over the city of Jerusalem, and listen to what he says. He says, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those who sent you. How often I have longed to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing." In this moment, Jesus is looking out over the city of Jerusalem. And as he's looking out and as he's watching the city, he says, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I long to gather your children together." And then he gives us this image. He says, like a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. Now, again, not many of you have a lot of interaction with chickens. How many of you have actually seen chicks? Okay, that's a lot better than the first service. The first service, there was like 5, and I was like, wow. But one of the interesting things, and as he uses this picture, it's important for you to understand this. One of the interesting things that hens will do in order to be able to protect their little ones is that they will gather them under their wings. There's multiple examples of how this plays out and stories of how hens have done this to protect their chicks. But there's one story in particular that I remember I heard years ago, and it continues to amaze me. But it was a story of a farmer actually in Canada, and his farm had been devastated by a wildfire, and everything had been burnt to the ground. And as he returned to the site of the fire, he was working through the ashes, and he was making his way toward the barn that had burnt down just to see what's left. And as he's making his way through it, he came across this lump, and he didn't know exactly what it was. It was just charred. Everything was charred. And so he took the stick that he had with him and he just kind of moved it aside. And as he was moving it aside, he realized that it was one of the hens. But as he moved it, out from under the hen, these chicks came running out. And when the fire had gotten close, rather than running, she had gathered her chicks to herself under her wings. And as the fire passed through, it scorched her, but left them unharmed. And the reality is that there's story after story after story. And what hens will do is, whether it's a predator that's coming or a storm that's coming, they gather their chicks under their wings and they protect them. And Jesus, as he's looking over this city, he says, that's what I want to do with you. How I long to gather you together under my wings. For you to be my children. But one of the reasons that I believe God steps into our story the way that he does is because of the fact that he wants for us to understand something about children. And part of that is how he views you. It's amazing to me as he's looking out over the city. And in this moment, Jesus doesn't look past their brokenness. It's not that he looks at them and says, oh, you're wonderful. You're amazing. Listen to how he starts the passage. He says, oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you. He's not messing around about their brokenness. He's calling it out. He's not seeing them for something that they're not. He's seeing them for exactly what they are. And he sees their sin, and he sees their mistakes, and he sees the evil. But what's amazing to me is that as he sees this and as he identifies this, he looks at them a certain way. And if you were to say this about someone, well, you would look at them a certain way, wouldn't you? You'd look at them with disdain, or you'd look at them at least with disappointment. You'd look at them with frustration. Maybe you'd look at them with condemnation. But Jesus, even as he identifies this, he looks at them and he says, I long to gather you to myself. How amazing is that? Let that sink in for just a second. Almost all of us in our brokenness and our mistakes think that God looks at us with disappointment. Almost all of us. But he doesn't. And he doesn't look at them. He doesn't look at them as his enemies, even though in many ways they were. He looks at them and he gives us this picture. So like a hen gathers her chicks. One of the other things that's interesting about this picture is not just the way that the hen protects the chicks, but chicks themselves are very interesting. Very interesting. Because, again, many of you have said that you've seen them, so you've seen this. They are frantic. Everything they do is fast. Everything they do. They just, if you get a bunch of them in a room, like in an area together, they just bounce off of one another. It's not so different from kids, but a little more frantic even than kids. And they're moving all over. Everything they do is frantic and scurried. And Jesus looks out over the city. And this is the picture that he uses to capture them. Like chicks. And as I was sitting with this passage, it struck me. How many of us, that's our story? We're living life and we're frantic and we're scurrying. He says, you're like little chicks. You're frantic and struggling and scurrying, but you're lost. You're lost. And what I want most is to be able to gather you under my wings, to bring you to myself. For you to be part of my family. The way that it says it in Ephesians, it says this: God decided in advance to adopt us into his own family by bringing us to himself through Jesus Christ. He gathers us together. He says from the very beginning, he intended this rescue. And Jesus comes to be able to bring us to himself, to gather us together, to bring us under his wings. Can I ask you something? How do you think God views you as you sit here today? Is this how you think God views you? That he looks at you not with disdain, not with disappointment, but longing. I want to gather you to myself. And that Christmas morning, Jesus steps into our story as a child. Because as God looks at you, he looks at you as a lost child. And in a very real way, That Christmas morning was the invasion of the orphanage. And Jesus decided, no more. I'm coming for them. And as we move through the day, it's interesting because these little ones are going to come up on stage, and you'll know who the parents are in the stage, or who the parents are in the crowd, because as soon as their little one comes on stage, they'll move a little bit further forward, and all of a sudden the phone will come out, and there'll be all this activity. Now here's the thing. Please don't stand up, okay? Please respect the people around you. Please stay in your seat. And I know there's going to be something inside of you that wants to run to the front and to be able to pull out that phone. And I actually did a wedding once where one of the aunts actually came up on stage behind me as I was doing the wedding to record with her phone over my shoulder while they were exchanging rings. No kidding, okay? I know some of you are crazy like that, all right? Love the people around you. Stay where you are. We've got great video of what's happening today, great photographers that are going to capture this for you. And so love them well. But that's how you're going to know the parents, because immediately there's this energy and there's this passion for these little ones that are on stage. Can I share something with you? The passion that you have for those little ones is nothing compared to the passion that Jesus has for you. And you're going to watch them on this stage, and you're going to be so excited to hug them afterwards, and you want to draw them close to you. And Jesus says, when I look at you, even in your brokenness, knowing everything about you, you know what I want to do? I want to wrap my arms around you. I want to gather you to myself. Christmas was the day that God invaded the orphanage and said, no more orphans. No more scattered, frantic. No. I want for you to be in my family. But it's interesting how he ends the passage. Let me take you back to it. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those who sent you. How often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. But you were not willing. The reality is that Jesus gave his life on that cross for you. No matter who you are, no matter what you've done, no matter what mistakes you've made. Jesus looks at you this way. And his invitation is for you to be adopted into his family in this way. And he longs to gather you together. The question is, are you willing? Are you willing? Are you willing to accept that he came for you? Are you willing to trust that he loves you and sees you this way? Are you willing? The only thing that will keep you from him is if you're not willing. And so I invite you, as we move through the day and as we celebrate these little ones, to reflect on how he sees you. But also, for those of you who haven't before, to go to him and say, I'm willing. I want to be yours. Accept what you've done for me. Or maybe today is the day that you decide, I'm going to find out what that's about. Because I want you the way that you wanted me. Will you pray with me? Father, I thank you for this moment where we see your heart so powerfully. This moment where you share what it is that you long for. And how amazing that even in the midst of our brokenness, that you long to gather us together, that this is how you view us. Father, I pray that today our understanding of that would explode in our lives, that we would be overwhelmed by that. And as we celebrate these little ones who are part of our family, we would be amazed that you love us more than we could ever love them. Thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.